Introducing the Queen James Version of the Bible available on Amazon.
All right, let's see it.
In the description, they literally claim that King James was a well-known bisexual.
So this is the overwhelming consensus among historians, and this was considered to be a pretty open secret during King James's own day. He was known to be publicly affectionate with Esme Stuart, the first Duke of Lennox, Robert Carr, the first Earl of Somerset, and George Villiers, the first Duke of Buckingham. Some of these men referred to themselves as James's lovers. Some of them had passageways that were built in certain manor houses between James's bedchambers and their own. We have letters where they're referring to each other as their own lovers, where they're complaining about someone leaving their bedchamber the night before and not staying the night in their bedchamber. This is not really controversial or really up for much debate.
And that is the final line of the description on Amazon. You can't choose your sexuality, but you can choose Jesus. This is a distortion of the Bible, and if you don't have a physical copy of a Bible, you need to get one now because they are going to rewrite it and keep rewriting it until there's nothing left that's true.
So the Queen James Bible has been out for over a decade. And it has not mitigated anybody's ability to access any other translations of the Bible. The notion that you need a hard copy because they're going to get rid of other translations of the Bible is a laughably asinine conspiracy theory. But this creator hasn't really discussed what the Queen James Bible actually does. It's really just a 1769 Blaney edition of the King James Version, the most popular edition that was ever published, and they are only reinterpreting those passages that are commonly used as condemnation of homosexuality. And some of these reinterpretations I would agree with, and some of them I would not. So in Genesis 19, they take the part where it says that we may know them, where the men of Sodom are demanding the two men be let out so that they might know them. It says that we might rape and humiliate them. Now, that's not what the Hebrew says, but that's absolutely the rhetorical force of that statement. That is absolutely what they wanted to do. And if you want more detail on how Genesis 19 is not a story about a homosexual orientation or about same-sex attraction, but the use of the threat of sexual assault against other men as a means of demeaning and debasing, you can see my video number, McClellan 1419. The other passage that I would suggest is accurately interpreting what's going on is Jude 1:7, where it talks about the men of Sodom and Gomorrah seeking after strange flesh. And that is reinterpreted to mean angelic flesh in the Queen James Bible. And that is in perfect alignment with the overwhelming academic consensus regarding what's going on here. The Greek says sarkosoteros. It means other flesh. This is not a reference to just unnatural sexual intercourse. It's a reference to sexual intercourse between humans and non-humans, based on the widespread understanding during that time period that angels coming down and having children with human women is one of the greatest evils that was perpetrated on the earth at that time. And so it interprets Sodom and Gomorrah as a story about humans seeking out sexual intercourse with angels. Now, the other passages that this edition of the Bible reinterprets, Romans 1, 1 Corinthians 6, 1 Timothy 1. These are based on arguments that I've seen scholars argue for in the past, but these are minority views. They are not the consensus view, and I don't think the arguments are very strong that these are really references to any kind of cultic impropriety or anything like that. I do think those passages are referring to same-sex intercourse, but as I've discussed many times on my channel, it's not as simple as just talking about homosexuality in general, or even a homosexual orientation, which was a conceptual framework that did not exist at the time. So to sum up, this creator doesn't really have a firm grasp of these issues or what they're talking about. This Bible makes a couple of changes that I think are in alignment with the academic consensus and make the text easier to understand, and then it makes some other changes that I would argue are not in alignment and actually move away from what the texts were intended to communicate. But if you think you might appreciate this Bible, go ahead and pick up a copy and check it out for yourself.
Now, from the majority of what my guy Dan is saying, I am in 100% agreement with concerning the homosexual nature of King James, to which I don't understand why Hebrew Israelites still want to claim that this man is black and that they base most of their beliefs on the King James Bible. And part of it is because he's black, but also because the King James Bible gives them that vindication of being sold and sailed away on slave ships for 400 years, which we've already done a video to debunk that idea that the transatlantic slave trade was such a prophecy in the Bible. Now, where I would disagree with Dan is the fact that the ones that he quote, as far as Corinthians and Timothy, they can allude to same-sex relationship, but to suggest that there was not a mentality of homosexuality in those times, maybe not in the same format or as outwardly as we have it today, but there were homosexuality and the homosexual behavior in those ancient times. But the Bible does explicitly talk against homosexuality when we look at Leviticus 20 or Romans, I believe it's Romans 1, that it talks about men neglecting the natural use of a woman, but to go and lie with other men in the same use that they would lie with a woman. This is something that is evident of that type of behavior that was available and prevalent in those societies of that day, especially when we go back and we look at the ancient Greek culture, the ancient Roman culture. We can see this type of behavior in the ancient Kemetic culture. We saw this type of behavior as well. So the idea that homosexuality wasn't something that was known to the people of that day would be a misinterpretation of ancient history and their behavior that you can find in their own writings. But even here within the Bible, since it is talked about in Leviticus 20, then it evidently was something that people back in those days recognized was a type of behavior that people had. So other than that, I fully agree with Dan's assessment of everything. And I agree that mostly that you will still be able to find a Bible today that is older. Everything is so digital now. We have the internet. You'll still be able to find these Bibles. So it's not like something will go away. But there are changes that do happen within the Bible. I remember as a child reading a Bible and it saying that the greatest commandment was to love the Father and keep his commandments. I saw that now has been taken out of one of the verses. I believe in Mark it was taken out to say, and keep his commandments, because we started going into this time of dispensation and grace. Whereas I believe the Matthew version or the Luke version, I can't recall exactly which one it's in, it still says in most Bibles that you are still to keep his commandments, to which most people will reject in Christianity because they cannot live based on those commandments of sacrifice, animal sacrificing, wearing mixed linen, not sleeping on the same bed or sitting on the same thing or touching anything that a woman who has been in a menstrual cycle. People will not be able to keep those laws. And the majority of those laws, you will find yourself in prison, violating animal rights and things of that nature if you were to try to keep those laws. Plus, they're just too damn hard for most people in modern day world to keep those commandments anyway. But you will notice subtle changes within the Bible, and those subtle changes will continue to happen. And whichever changes become more popular are the ones that will then become the new word of God. But other than that, I am right there with you, my guy, Dan. So remember always, you have to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.